Hi guys, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another video. So yeah, we are once again at the end of the month, so it's time to show you everything that I've picked up, and these are all from the month of February 2023. Actually quite a lot of titles here. I didn't realise I'd picked up quite so many this month. Most of them are all like second-hand, like CEX pickups and things like that. But there's a few new releases in there as well. But yeah, I'll try and get through them as quickly as I can because I don't want this to be too long of a video. But I'll try and get through them as quickly as I can, but also giving you my thoughts on all of them. So yeah, let's get into it. So first up, we have a DVD pickup and we have Jay and Silent Bob, the reboot. So yeah, I've been recently rewatching a lot of the Kevin Smith, Jay and Silent Bob, Clerks movies. I've been rewatching all of them. The main reason was because we got Clerks free earlier this year. But this was one that I hadn't seen, so I decided to pick it up because I think it does actually take place before Clerks 3. This is actually quite hard to find in the UK. I think the DVD and the Blu-ray are both out of print and they go for quite a lot of money. I know you can get an import of the Blu-ray and I was going to get that, but then I did actually find the DVD in my local CEX. It was a little bit more than I'd normally pay for a DVD, but it was still cheaper than getting the import of the Blu-ray. So yeah, I just got the DVD of it. And the movie itself, I really enjoyed it. Obviously, it's a reboot, so it kind of takes the mickey out of a lot of, the reboot era that we live in at the moment. Like, what are the differences between remakes and reboots and all that kind of stuff. But it still feels like classic Jay and Silent Bob. Really funny in places, great dialogue. There's a lot of old characters from the Strikes Back movie make a return, and then there's also some new characters in there as well. And yeah, it's a lot of fun. I don't think it's the strongest movie in the entire franchise, but I still had a lot of fun with it. But yeah, that is Jay and Silent Bob, the reboot. And the other DVD that I picked up was a movie called Secretary. So I was on a stream a few weeks ago, and whilst I was on it, my girlfriend Zoe was upstairs watching a movie. And after the stream was over, I came upstairs and I asked her how her evening was, what did she watch? And she told me that she watched this movie. And after she told me what the movie was about, I knew I had to watch it. It just sounded right up my street. It's a movie that stars James Spader and Maggie Gyllenhaal. Maggie Gyllenhaal plays this young girl who she has some personal problems in her life. She still lives at home with her parents. She doesn't really know what she wants to do with her life. But she ends up getting this job as a secretary for this lawyer played by James Spader. And after she gets the job, they realize that they have like this attraction towards each other. But as the movie goes further, we find out that he loves to be very dominant in a relationship and she loves to be very submissive. Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking this movie sounds exactly like 50 Shades of Grey, and it basically is, but I think it's much better than 50 Shades of Grey. It's a much better movie. I know it probably sounds a bit depraved and a bit pornographic as well, but it's actually more of like a black comedy. There's a lot of really funny moments in it, and it's actually kind of got a sweet story in the center of it. It may not feel like that at first, but I had an absolute blast with this movie. I thought it was very funny, very interesting, and yeah, just some great performances from the two lead actors in it. So yeah, that is Secretary. Right, so on to the Blu-ray pickups now, and the first one we have here is by far my favorite movie of 2022, and that is Aftersun. So yeah, this is a movie about a father and his daughter, his young daughter. They go on like this holiday together in Turkey. The daughter is still quite young, but she's very happy-go-lucky, very naive to a lot of like real-world problems we all face as adults. And then we have the father, played by Paul Mescal, who, he tries to put on a brave face for his daughter whilst they're on holiday, but he's clearly got some inner demons eating away at him, and he suffers from depression. But he still tries to give his daughter the best holiday he can. And yeah, I just thought this was a fantastic movie. Really powerful, really harrowing in places, and what a hell of an ending this movie has. I remember when this movie finished, I think I just sat there for like 5 minutes in a total stunned silence, just completely in awe at what I had just watched. And I remember I was I was still thinking about this movie like hours and hours after it had finished. And I always think, it's been a good movie when a movie does that to you. You're still thinking about it hours and hours after you've finished it. And yeah, it's just a powerful film. Absolutely fantastic. My favorite of 2022. And yeah, I had to get it as soon as it came out on Blu-ray. So yeah, that is After Sun. Next Blu-ray pickup we have is Ant-Man. So yeah, I picked this up mainly because obviously we've had the new Ant-Man movie, but also I'm just trying to catch up on a lot of the Marvel movies that I haven't seen. I'm not the biggest fan of the Marvel franchise, if I'm being totally honest. Most of them I can take or leave them. But like I said, I do just want to catch up on the ones that I haven't seen. And yeah, this was very cheap on Amazon. I think it was only about £2 or £3. So yeah, I decided to just pull the trigger and give it a watch. And I know a lot of people do really like this one. And yeah, I'm looking forward to watching it. So yeah, that is Ant-Man. Next up, we have Behind Enemy Lines, starring Gene Hackman and Owen Wilson. Yeah, this was a really enjoyable movie, based on a true story, I believe, about this fighter pilot who is shot down over Bosnia. And it's deep within enemy lines, as the title suggests. And Gene Hackman plays the commander who's trying to get him out of there, but they can't go in there and get him because it would be considered an act of war. So Owen Wilson's character has to basically find his own way out of there without being, without being killed. And yeah, I thought this was a really good movie. I remember it coming out and I remember it was huge. I remember it was everywhere. But for whatever reason, I just never got around to seeing it at the time it came out. Some people might find it a bit strange seeing Owen Wilson in like an action movie, because I think we all know him best for comedy movies, but I think he does pretty well in this one. And yeah, on the whole, it's a really enjoyable, tense thriller with some great action sequences in it. Yeah, that is Behind Enemy Lines. Next up, we have Clerks 3. So yeah, as I said before, I picked up Jay and Silent Bob the reboot, and then after that, I picked up Clerks 3. I enjoyed Clerks 3. Definitely not as funny as most of the other movies in this entire franchise. It still has its moments, but what was really interesting about this movie is how heartfelt it was and how sad it was in places. I didn't expect certain things to happen in this movie, and yeah, it was just quite a shock to the system when I did watch it and things unfolded. I enjoyed it. Again, I don't think it's one of the strongest movies in the entire franchise. I do prefer a lot of the older stuff from the 90s. But it's still a very worthy addition to the entire franchise. So yeah, that is Clerks 3. Next up, we have Creed 2. So yeah, I picked this up because obviously we've got a new Creed movie coming out in the next few days. I have seen this movie before, but I've never actually owned it on Blu-ray. I do already own the first one, and yeah, really enjoy the first movie. When I saw this one, I wasn't the biggest fan of it, and that's probably the reason why I never picked it up. But again, it was really cheap on Amazon, and I decided to get it and give it a rewatch just in preparation for this new Creed movie. I do think, on the whole of the entire Rocky franchise, this is probably my least favorite movie in that entire franchise. But that's not saying it's a bad movie. I actually don't think there's a single bad movie in the entire Rocky and Creed franchise. But this is the only movie that doesn't really do anything for me. It doesn't have any sort of impact. I think it's a good movie. I just don't really think it's a great one. But it is good to see the likes of Dolph Lundgren as Ivan Drago back in the movie. But I do feel he is a little bit underused in the movie. But it's still a really solid sequel to the first Creed movie. And yeah, I'm looking forward to Creed 3. But yeah, this one is Creed 2. Next up, we have a Blu-ray that was a first-time watch for me. And we have Dead Man Walking. So this is a movie that came out in 1995, and it stars Sean Penn as this guy who's on death row. And we also have Susan Sarandon who plays this nun, and she becomes his religious counsel as he's on his last few days on death row before he's about to be executed. And this was a fantastic drama, really profound, really harrowing in places. And it poses some really important questions about the death penalty and things like that. And what a performance from Sean Penn. I mean, I think this might be his best performance in a movie. He's got some great ones out there, but His acting in this was just stunning. Yeah, fantastic. And I had a really great time watching this movie. If you haven't seen it, I would definitely recommend it. And that is Dead Man Walking. Next up, we have a movie that I have seen before, and I picked it up mainly just to add it to the collection. But we have Fatal Attraction. So yeah, I think a lot of people know this movie. Michael Douglas and Glenn Close. Glenn Close plays this woman who becomes infatuated with Michael Douglas's character. She starts stalking him, and then it turns into, threatening behavior, and it just gets worse and worse and worse. And yeah, it's a great movie. I've only seen it the one time, so I'm looking forward to giving it a rewatch. And yeah, this was a pickup from CEX, and it's one of these premium HMV premium collection ones. It was a pretty good price. I know you can get a 4K of it, but I don't really like the movie enough to really get it on 4K, so I'm happy to just stick with the Blu-ray. But yeah, I'm happy to have it in the collection finally, and that is Fatal Attraction. Next up, we have another pickup from CEX, and we have Hamburger Hill. So yeah, this is a Vietnam War movie that came out in the late 80s. It came out amongst quite a surge of Vietnam War movies. I think it came out around the same time as Platoon, Casualties of War, Full Metal Jacket, and of course Hamburger Hill. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was pretty good. I don't think it's quite as good as those other movies that I've mentioned. This one didn't really leave much of a lasting effect on me, whereas, Platoon, that's one of my favourites. Casualties of War is very harrowing, and Full Metal Jacket, although I don't think it's one of Kubrick's strongest movies, I still think it's a very good Vietnam War movie nonetheless. This one doesn't really have anything as special as those other movies, but it's still a really enjoyable movie, very raw, very visceral, some great battle sequences, and yeah, on the whole, I really enjoyed it. But yeah, that is Hamburger Hill. Next up, we have Insidious: The Last Key, otherwise known as Insidious 4. So yeah, I've always been a bit of a fan of this franchise. I really like the first Insidious movie. I think it's a really solid horror movie, very creepy in places. I thought the sequel was a really solid second movie. Not quite as good as the first one, but it was a pretty solid follow-up. But when it came to the third movie coming out, I remember seeing it and I did not like it at all. I think I hated it, in fact. So when this fourth movie came out, I think I just ignored it completely because I just expected it was going to be like that third movie. I think the third movie just left a bit of a sour taste in my mouth. But I have heard from some people that they consider this to be a bit of a return to form and a better movie than the third one. So yeah, I decided to pick it up. And also, I believe we've got a fifth movie coming out later this year. So yeah, another reason why I picked it up was to watch it just in preparation for this new movie that we're getting. But yeah, I'm still looking forward to watching it. I do like a good horror movie, and I did enjoy the first two Insidious movies, so hopefully it is a return to form. But yeah, that is Insidious: The Last Key. Next up, we have Legionnaire, starring Jean-Claude Van Damme, and this is one of those 88 films releases. I know they released quite a few Van Damme movies, but I decided to pick this one up because this was, I think, the only one I hadn't actually seen. He plays this guy who is on the run from these gangsters, and he decides the best way to get away from them is to just join the French Foreign Legion. It's set during the 1920s, and then, it goes from there. He takes part in a few battles, and yeah, I enjoyed it. I think it was a straight-to-DVD movie, but you wouldn't think it from watching it. The production values are pretty good, the direction's good, and yeah, Van Damme's pretty good in the movie as well. I don't think it's one I'll come back to all that often. I don't think it's one of his greatest movies of all time, but you could definitely do a lot worse. But yeah, that is Legionnaire. Next up, and don't judge me too much on this one, we have The Mummy, The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor, otherwise known as The Mummy 3. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of those first two Mummy movies. I just have huge nostalgia for them. I remember loving them when they first came out, and I still love them to this day. But this one, I have not seen this movie since I saw it in the cinema back in 2008, and I remember I hated it. I just absolutely hated this movie, and even today I know it still gets a lot of hate. But I found it in a charity shop. I think it was £1. And I thought, you know what, for £1, I'll give it a revisit because it has been such a long time. And yeah, on rewatch, I still don't think it's great, but I had a little bit more of a better time with it than when I saw it in the cinema. I think the main problem with this movie is it doesn't have Rachel Weisz in it, and I just think it was a mistake to recast her. They should have just completely written her character out of the movie. But other than that, I think the movie is a decent time. It's nothing special. It's not great, but it's not terrible either. I'm happy to have it in the collection anyway. But yeah, that is The Mummy, The Tomb of the Dragon Emperor. Next up, we have Robin Hood, Men in Tights. So yeah, I'm a huge fan of Mel Brooks. I love Young Frankenstein, Blazing Saddles, and my personal favourite is Spaceballs. But this was one of his movies that I'd actually never seen before. But I have to admit, I was a bit disappointed with this movie. It very much feels like Mel Brooks on autopilot. I don't think a lot of the jokes really land. And I just felt it was a bit too long and a bit too boring, if I'm being totally honest. I know there are a lot of people who really like this movie. They may have a lot of nostalgia for it. But for me, I thought it was just okay, but definitely not the strongest Mel Brooks movie for me. But yeah, that is Robin Hood, Men in Tights. Next up, I have 2 Blu-rays here, and the reason why I've picked these up was mainly just to upgrade them over my existing DVD copies. And the first one we have Romancing the Stone. So yeah, this movie is a childhood nostalgic classic for me. Absolutely adore this movie. It stars Michael Douglas and Kathleen Turner and Danny DeVito. And yeah, it's one of those movies that came out in the 80s, and it's very much riding off the success of, movies like Indiana Jones. But I just think this is a really fun adventure movie. Great action and great comedy in it as well. The only problem with this release is I picked this up from CEX online because the Blu-ray is actually very rare here in this country and goes for quite a lot of money. And I decided to take a gamble on ordering it from CEX, but I don't know if you can see this on the camera, but the cover is green, but then it gets here and it's blue. And if you look at the spine, it's completely washed out. It looks like it's been left in the sun or something. The front and the back are fine, but it's just this spine is just completely like bleached, and yeah, it's just strange. But I'm not going to lose any sleep over it. It's all about the movie at the end of the day. But that is the risk you take when you order from CEX and you don't get to see the copy in store before you buy it. But nonetheless, the movie itself, I love it. Have great nostalgia for it. And yeah, I'm looking forward to rewatching it on Blu-ray. But yeah, that is Romancing the Stone. And you probably know what's coming next after that movie, but we have Jewel of the Nile. So yeah, this is the sequel to Romancing the Stone. And again, I have a lot of nostalgia for this movie. Again, we have Michael Douglas, Kathleen Turner, and Danny DeVito returning. And again, it's just another fun adventure movie with great action and comedy, and very much riding off the success of movies like Indiana Jones. The difference with this one is this is a movie that seems to get a hell of a lot of hate, and personally, I've never really understood why. I know people who consider this one of the worst movies ever. It gets lumped together with movies like Batman and Robin, and yeah, I've just never really understood it. Maybe I've just got my nostalgia for it playing too much on my side, but I've just always had a good time with it, and I've never really understood the hate. Is it as good as Romancing the Stone? Definitely not, but I still think it's a really fun, enjoyable movie, and the cast are great in it. And yeah, I love it. But that is Jewel of the Nile. Next up, we have a 4K release, and we have Scream. So yeah, this is the 2022 movie. And I picked this up mainly because, again, we've got a new Scream movie coming out in the next couple of weeks, and this was on sale in HMV. And yeah, I decided to finally pick it up. I have seen this movie before. I saw it in the cinema, and I had a really good time with it. I thought it was a very inoffensive movie. I didn't think it was like amazing, 10 out of 10, but I didn't think it was a bad movie either. Probably my favorite movie since probably Scream 2. I think it's a better movie than Scream 4, and probably a better movie than Scream 3. But But yeah, I enjoyed it. Looking forward to giving it a rewatch in preparation for Scream 6. But yeah, that is Scream on 4K. Next up, we have The Shallows. So yeah, this is a shark movie that was released in 2016, I think it was. Stars Blake Lively as this girl who goes to the beach. She's surfing, but then she gets kind of stuck just a little bit offshore, and she's being attacked by this shark, basically, and it turns into a bit of a survival story, and she has to try and figure out how to get back to shore whilst also, not getting killed by this shark. That's as simple as it gets. I was a bit disappointed with this movie, I've got to admit. I just didn't think it was anything special. I know a lot of people really like it and consider it one of the best shark movies we've had in years. I mean, it doesn't hold a candle to Jaws, obviously, but I don't know, I just didn't really get that much enjoyment out of it. I thought it was fine, but I don't think I'll ever rewatch this one if I'm being totally honest. But, if you do like your shark movies, you might get more out of it than I did. But yeah, it was probably about more like a 5 out of 10 for me, this movie. But yeah, that is The Shallows. Next up, we have Toy Story 4. And yeah, again, this is a movie I have seen before, but it's just one of those that I've never had in the collection. And I saw it very, very cheap on Amazon. And yeah, I decided to get it. I'm a huge fan of those first two Toy Story movies. I think I was 5 years old when the first one came out, and I was 9 when the second came out. So I was just the right age to appreciate those movies. But I've never been the biggest fan of Toy Story 3 or 4. And on rewatch, I still feel the same. I think the problem with Toy Story 3 is that by the time it came out, I think I was 19 or 20, so obviously not a kid anymore, and I probably just didn't have the same appreciation for the movie. And then obviously this one only came out a few years ago, but this one, I just feel like this movie has a very seen it all before kind of feel to it. And even upon rewatch, I still feel the same. I think the movie's fine, but I don't really think it adds anything new to the franchise, if I'm being totally honest. I do quite like the ending. It does have quite a sad ending. It hits home, similar to the ending of Toy Story 3. But yeah, for me, I just love those first two movies. 3 and 4 they're fine, but for me, they just don't hold a candle. But I'm happy to still have 4 in the collection finally. But yeah, that is Toy Story 4. Next up, we have Under the Silver Lake. A movie I've heard a lot about. I've heard a lot of people talk about this movie. Seems to be a very divisive one. It stars Andrew Garfield. He plays this oddball character. He loves his conspiracy theories, and at the beginning of the movie, his neighbor disappears without a trace, and he decides to go on this journey to find out what happened to her. The best way to describe this movie would be, it's kind of like Alfred Hitchcock's Vertigo mixed with David Lynch's Mulholland Drive. Now, they're two of my favourite movies, so the thought of this movie feeling like both of them should have appealed to me. But I have to admit, I really struggled with this movie. I thought it was way too long, a bit too slow. It meandered a lot of the time. It didn't need to be as long as it was. And yeah, on the whole, I really struggled with it. I know a lot of people say it's a movie that requires multiple rewatches because you don't pick up on certain things on the first viewing. And whilst that might be the case, I just don't know when I'm going to want to rewatch this movie, because I did find it a bit of a struggle to sit through. And I can't remember the last time I was checking my watch like so many times whilst watching a movie, but I was with this one. I'm glad to have seen it, and yeah, it's a very divisive one. But yeah, for me, it didn't quite hit the mark. But anyway, we have Under the Silver Lake. Right, so I've just got a few boutique releases here, and the first one we have is Magnificent Warriors. This is a release from Eureka, and this is a Hong Kong action movie from the 80s starring Michelle Yeoh. She plays this secret agent, and it's set during World War II, I think it is, and she basically is in the movie to help this village that is being overrun by these Japanese forces. Again, another movie that feels very much like it's riding off the success of Indiana Jones. I thought this movie was pretty fun. I don't think it's one of the strongest movies from like Hong Kong action cinema. Definitely not one of Michelle Yeoh's strongest movies, but I still had a lot of fun with it nonetheless. But yeah, that is Magnificent Warriors. Next up, we have another release from Eureka, and we have Violent Streets. So yeah, this is an early 70s Japanese Yakuza movie. I'm really into these movies at the moment. They just ooze a certain class, a certain style that is just really cool. And yeah, this movie's no exception. I don't think it's one of the strongest Japanese Yakuza movies that I've seen from that era, but it's still a lot of fun nonetheless. Very much like a lot of the others in terms of plot and characters. And yeah, just a really fun movie with some great moments in it. But yeah, that is Violent Streets. Right, so next up I've got a few movies from a brand new boutique label here in the UK, and that is Radiance Films. Now, I picked up one of their releases last month, which I showed in last month's video, but I decided to pick up the rest of the releases that they've released so far. And the first one I've got to show you is a movie called A Woman Kills. So yeah, this is a late 60s French movie, basically about this killer who is targeting prostitutes. And at the beginning of the movie, the suspected killer is caught and executed, but then we find out that they've actually executed the wrong person as the killings start up again. And it kind of goes from there. This is a very short movie. It's only about 69 minutes long. It does kind of have that sort of Hitchcock influence to it, but you can tell that this movie may have influenced, people like Brian De Palma. It definitely has that sort of feel to it as well. Really interesting movie. Probably not one I will go back to all that much, but still a really interesting movie nonetheless. So yeah, if you like your late 60s thrillers in the vein of Brian De Palma and Hitchcock, you might enjoy this one. But yeah, that is A Woman Kills. And the next one from Radiance Films we have is Miami Blues. This is a movie I have actually seen before, but I remember when I first saw it, I didn't really like it. It wasn't exactly what I was expecting it to be, but after buying this and rewatching it, I did have a much better time with it. I think initially I expected this movie was going to be like sort of a thriller, sort of noir movie, especially because it came out in the early 90s, but it's actually more of a black comedy in a way. It stars Alec Baldwin, and he plays this guy who's been released from prison, and he decides to start a new life in Miami, and he tries to sort of go straight, but not long after he gets there, he starts causing trouble again. Fred Ward plays the police detective who is on his tail, and Jennifer Jason Leigh plays the love interest for Alec Baldwin. And yeah, really enjoyed it on a rewatch. Don't expect it to be what you might think it is. It's definitely more of like a black comedy, but when you watch the movie and you look at it that way, it's actually pretty enjoyable. But yeah, that is Miami Blues. Next up from Radiance Films, we have The Working Class Goes to Heaven. So yeah, this is an Italian movie that came out in the 1970s, and it stars Gian Maria Volante, who's probably best known for playing the villain in A Fistful of Dollars, and also the villain in For a Few Dollars More. And in this movie, he plays this factory worker who has an accident at work. And following the accident, he starts to get involved in political and revolutionary protests, something that he was strongly against before the movie started. And yeah, I thought this was a very interesting movie. Kind of has an interesting look at sort of industrial corruption and capitalism, and I think it's also a really interesting movie that kind of shows what it was like in Italy in the 1970s, because even though it was well before my time, I've always heard that in the 1970s, Italy was always seemed to be on the end of its rope, and there was a lot of trouble in the country back then. So yeah, this is one of the many movies that takes an interesting look at that time. I don't think it's a movie I'm probably going to revisit all that much, but really interesting movie nonetheless. But yeah, that is The Working Class Goes to Heaven. Next up, we have a movie also from Radiance Films, and this is part of their Fun City editions. And we have a movie called Cutter's Way. So yeah, this is a movie that came out in 1981, I think it was, and it stars Jeff Bridges, and it also stars John Hurd. He is probably best known for playing the dad in the first two Home Alone movies. And in this movie, Jeff Bridges plays this guy who he thinks he's seen a murder, and he thinks he's seen where the body has been disposed. And he tells his friend about it, who's played by John Hurd, and the two of them basically decide to investigate this murder and find out what has happened. This is quite a unique film, I must say. Takes a really interesting spin on sort of the thriller noir type of movie. John Hurd, I have never seen him play a character quite like this one ever. He plays the titular Cutter. And yeah, he's just this guy who walks around with an eye patch. He's only got one arm. He literally looks like a pirate who's living on the land. And yeah, it's just a really strange and unique movie, but I really enjoyed it. Great performances from the cast and just a really interesting story. But yeah, that is Cutter's Way. And then the last film from Radiance Films, also on the Fun City editions, we have Married to the Mob. So yeah, this is a late 80s comedy thriller starring Michelle Pfeiffer. She plays this woman who is married to this gangster played by Alec Baldwin. And Alec Baldwin gets killed at the beginning of the movie, and she kind of sees it as her way to finally get away from the mob life, because she just hates everything to do with the mob. But even after her husband has died, she finds that she just can't get away from them. The family still want they still want her for various reasons. We've also got a police detective played by Matthew Modine who thinks she is the best way to finally bring the rest of the family to justice, but she just doesn't want anything to do with it. So yeah, it's a really fun, enjoyable movie. A lot of comedy. And yeah, just some great moments in it. But yeah, that is Married to the Mob. Right, so next up I've got two releases from Indicator, and these are two releases that have actually been out of print for quite a while. But earlier in the month, Indicator announced that they had reacquired quite a lot of out of print titles. So I decided to have a look at what they had and found that there was two that I was really interested in getting. So I did just that. And the first one we have is the limited edition set of Force 10 from Navarone. So yeah, this is obviously the sequel to Guns of the Navarone starring Gregory Peck. And in this movie, we have the same characters in it, but this time played by Robert Shaw and Edward Fox. But we've also got some other great cast members in it, like Harrison Ford, Carl Weathers, Franco Nero, Richard Kiel, Barbara Bach, also directed by Guy Hamilton. So there's a lot of James Bond connections with this movie, and at times it does feel like a James Bond movie. I'd also like to give a shout out to my good friend James over at JT at the Movies, because I know he's a big fan of this movie. I remember quite a while ago, I remember him doing a Harrison Ford marathon, and this movie was in there, and I think it was one he hadn't seen. But when he watched it, I remember him singing his praises about it. And yeah, he also did an unboxing of this release. So I will leave a link in the description if you want to see what's inside. Because yeah, it's a very lovely box set. And yeah, really enjoyable movie. But yeah, that is Force 10 from Navarone. And then the other out of print title that I picked up from Indicator was the limited edition set of Mad Dog Morgan. So yeah, this is a movie that was released in the 1970s, and it stars Dennis Hopper. He plays the titular character of Mad Dog Morgan. And yeah, it's apparently based on a true story, set during the 1800s, and it is basically just about this character called Mad Dog Morgan, who is an Irish outlaw living in Australia. That is basically the plot of the movie. Not much substance to it, but a lot of fun moments in it. Feels very raw, very cheap, but very enjoyable nonetheless. And yeah, Dennis Hopper's great in it. I mean, he's great in most of the movies he's in, and yeah, he's just having a blast in this movie. And yeah, I really enjoyed it, and yeah, a really nice set from Indicator. But yeah, that is Mad Dog Morgan. And next up, we have another release from Indicator, but this is one of their new releases, and we have the limited edition set of The Big Gun Down. So yeah, this is a movie that I could not wait for this one. One of my most anticipated releases. It's a spaghetti western starring Lee Van Cleef. Say no more. I love my spaghetti westerns. I think Lee Van Cleef is great. Obviously, we've got him in the Dollars trilogy, but he's been in a lot of great spaghetti westerns like this one, Day of Anger, The Great Duel. Yeah, just a lot of great movies. And yeah, I had a lot of fun with this one. You've got multiple cuts of the movie. You've got all the good stuff that you get in these limited edition indicator sets. And the movie was a lot of fun. I enjoyed it. Lee Van Cleef is great in it. But yeah, that is The Big Gundown. And then my last pickup for February, we have The Last Emperor. So yeah, this is the Arrow 4K limited edition box set version of the movie. Admittedly, a movie I'd never seen before. I'd always known about it. I always wanted to watch it, but I just never got round to it. But once Arrow announced this, I just thought now is probably the best time to get it and sit down and watch it. And I enjoyed it. I thought it was a pretty good movie. I don't think it's anything special. And I think a lot of people feel the same way. I know this movie is considered somewhat controversial because it won Best Picture at the Oscars the year it came out. But I know a lot of people feel it didn't deserve to win. And I can maybe see that. It doesn't really have anything special about it in comparison to a lot of other Oscar-winning movies. But I still enjoyed it nonetheless. I thought it was a pretty good movie. You get two cuts of the movie on here. You get the theatrical cut and you also get the extended cut. However, it should be noted that the theatrical cut is on 4K, but the extended is only on Blu-ray. So if you're more of a fan of the extended cut, you may just want to bear that in mind, that you can only watch it on Blu-ray. But yeah, as usual with Arrow, really nice box set, lots of special features and all that good stuff. And yeah, I enjoyed the movie and it looks really nice in 4K as well. But yeah, that is The Last Emperor. So there you go, guys. Those are my pickups for the month of February 2023. I apologise for the length of this video. Like I said, I didn't quite realise how many titles I had to get through, but hopefully I haven't bored you too much. Let me know in the comments if you've seen any of these movies. Have you picked any of these up? What do you think of them? I would love to hear your thoughts. But until then, I will see you all again on the next one. So take care, guys.